What's up everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So today we're going to be doing an analysis of the Red Hood character trailer. Now this is a cinematic character trailer, but as we've seen in the past few trailers and from some of my videos, I've shown you that a lot of the assets, animations, moves, abilities are actually those which are contained within the game. Now, it is quite interesting to make that conclusion, but we've seen from a lot of the gameplay, short gameplay, that they are using the same assets, but in the cinematic trailers, they're rendering it at higher frame rates and higher quality. Now, this particular breakdown is going to be very different. This character seems to have stirred a lot of the pot on the internet, and I think it's quite interesting because this is exactly what Gotham Knights needs. Gotham Knights needs the community to be talking about the technical aspects of the game at this stage, because as much as we may have our preferences of whether or not we want the game to be in a specific way, the game has already been developed largely to the taste and to the vision of the developers. But in terms of some of the different aspects like gameplay, the representation of the characters, I think these are valid conversations to have overall. But today's analysis is not necessarily going to start like my usual analysis where I try to start from the beginning, but instead it's going to start from the end. You might wonder why the end? Well, that's because the question that is being asked right now is if Red Hood is being depicted in the very best way possible. This is a very heated subject because if you look on the different media, you're going to see conversations are actually going on surrounding this. On my video where I actually posted the trailer after it had been released this morning, there also are concerns on Twitter, which is something that I never envisioned would have happened because I usually stay very quiet on Twitter. It seems like the conversation is also resonating among users and possible future comic book fans as well who want to play this game in a sense. I guess future gamers or future players of this game that are comic book fans. Let me correct that and make sure that I'm quite, accurate in my description. So what really went on this morning was when they posted this particular video on Twitter, somebody made a comment as to their preference of this particular game and the way it was represented. And I quoted it, and then I also quoted another comment that I've seen many other fans make. And this particular, player and Twitter user, possibly, they're probably going to be playing the game because they really enjoy the game. This person said, I don't give a blank if he had powers or was a brute in the comics, and they wanted a representation of Jason that looked like or played like the Injustice 2 version of him. But also, many of you, and I myself, have also seen where fans have said they should have represented him as he is in the comics. And I said in my conclusion, bro, this must be a hard game to make. And the truth is, Gotham Knights seems to be a very challenging game to make. In fact, when I went ahead and actually did this, it had 122 likes. I don't think I've ever had that much on Twitter before because I usually stay quiet, which basically told me that a lot of players probably see this sentiment. And some people even went ahead to explain and said, comic fans are quite guilty of that because we're very protective in a sense, and change is not something that a lot of comic book fans actually like. And this is actually a very good thing in a sense, but sometimes if we don't necessarily catch ourselves, we may make it a bad thing. And so the reason I started at the end of this video for the analysis is because at the end of all of the character trailers and even most of the Gotham Knights video material, they usually post some comics. And in this particular one, the comic selection is quite interesting. The comic selection is not necessarily just a random selection of comics, but I think it really gives you as the user or somebody who may be asking questions about Jason, where these developers and story writers are drawing their depiction of Jason from. And so very carefully, when you look at the way they've placed the Under the Red Hood, the Batman Death in the Family, and Red Hood and the Outlaw comics, you're going to see that they may be drawing some of their inspiration, some of their story and narrative arcs from these storylines. A Death in the Family I have not read. I could go ahead and purchase it and go ahead and read it, but I think I already can guess where this is coming from. This may have also kind of spurred on some of the elements in Arkham Knight, so I think possibly Arkham Knight most likely drew from this. Under the Red Hood possibly also has been depicted in some sense in the animated series, but I'm sure there are going to be differences in the comics. The comics usually deviate. But more importantly for today's conversation is Red Hood and the Outlaws. This is actually issue number 1 under the New 52 line of comics. And I think it's actually very interesting that we look at this because Jason was out here throwing out what somebody described as Kamehameha with guns. All right, I'm not joking. I saw a comment on my video and somebody said, oh, it's basically Kamehameha or Kamehameha with guns. And I just started laughing. I didn't even know what to say because he threw out this move and it jumped out. It hit like 4 people. And I think it's some sort of a nightmare mystic soul type projectile. And now I'm certain many comic book fans want the best out of this game. Many people want the best representation of Jason. And so for the most part, a lot of folks don't really agree with how this depiction of some of his soul abilities are actually being put here. Now, also, let me go ahead and preface this with the fact that I like the Mystic Leap. I don't think it should be taken away, but I'm not necessarily arguing all of this because I like the elements. I'm arguing this because this is where creative freedom tries to respect the character, but has to, at some point, redefine itself to stand out as unique. And we, as fans, we probably are in a position where we should at least give them a little bit of a commendation for trying this particular, aspect. I'm not saying we should embrace it wholeheartedly or we should just, suck it up and no. But at least the efforts to move in this direction and depicted in a gameplay aspect seems to me as something that is commendable. So even if we may not necessarily like it, I still think there's something that is, redemptive about it overall. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these comic lines and see how Jason's mystic powers are actually attained, achieved, depicted in the comics, and even talked about. So I went ahead and did a little bit of reading, which is something that you have to do to be able to get some things right. And I got to read Red Hood and the Outlaws. I got issue 1, which kind of gives us a little bit of the new 52 variants, actually. It gives us some sort of an opening as to how Red Hood is exposed to some of the League of Assassins type stuff where he's been resurrected with the Lazarus Pit. And also there's an ancient all-caste, I think, society or all-caste. Maybe somebody can explain in depth to me because I'm somewhat new to this, folks. And there seems to be an all-caste group or a group of monks or magicians or something that he's also been exposed to that are mystical in a sense. So his mystic powers seem to be drawing from all of this at the same time. And when you go ahead and look at, say, some of the different exposure that we get to see in the comics, it appears to me that Jason's power based on this has not been fully explored. This is where I think the developers have taken the liberty to go ahead and continue to build upon his powers. You see, this is where I think they've done their best to respect this character's depiction, even though the moves that we got to see in the character trailer, like the Kamehameha with guns and the Mystic Leap, even though they're not anywhere canonical, there is still this sentiment that Jason is quite stronger than he actually knows he is. There seems to be room for discovery of a Jason that is guided, of a Jason that has mystical possibilities in his moveset. And we see them, and I don't want to show too, the reason I'm scrolling through, by the way, in case you're wondering, is so I don't do too many spoilers for you guys. And it seems the way in this depiction anyways. So let me just go ahead and put this out here since it's here. It seems he and his friends are captured. Starfire and I can't remember his name. Forgive me. They're captured and they continue to egg him on and say, hey, Jason, come on. You can do this. You can get us out of this mess. You have the power to do some of this stuff, to recover your memories. So this is also another ability that he has as well. The ability to recover his memories, to be able to bring them back. It's not something that is a fight kind of ability or a combat ability, but it is still there. It is not the Mystic Blaze because that's always what we cite. That's always what people always, go ahead and talk about. But it seems that there's an ability here. And even still, it appears to me that his teammates, Starfire and the other guy that I can't remember his name. I don't know why. I read about you just now. I don't know why I forgot your name, bro. He's here in these comics. But I guess somebody can comment in the comment section and correct me. In this conundrum that they're in, they continue to tell him like, bro, you got this. You're Jason Todd. You have the ability to do, to get us out of this mess. You're quite stronger than you think. And I think that overall, with all of this, there is a basis as a creative. If you're going to show Jason in a mystical sense, you have the freedom to be able to show him like this. So when we see him here with these mystical powers bothering him, when we see him where, you know, he basically has these things frying tablets because, you know, he can't necessarily control all of his power, I think the developers are drawing from something that is a lot more deeper than we've seen anywhere else. But it does have a foundation. It is not something that they're just throwing in there because they want to throw in there. And this is all just the story side and the story element. Now, we look at, say, the gameplay, the programming, the development side, and a character like this is a character that is a magic type character. In RPG games, I would probably say Jason seems like a brute with a mage ability attached to him. So Gotham Knights has got 4 characters. It's not designed like a traditional RPG, but the different characters and the knights do have RPG elements to them. And so you're going to see aspects of their abilities that combine some of the themes of your RPG characters or RPG archetypes. And I think Jason is the most, RPG infused character in the entire game. And so that's why I decided that we would do this analysis starting from the end where we saw the comics and the literature before we make our way to all of what we got to see so far. So let's look at melee combat with him. He is basically punching, he's basically slamming, he's basically kicking, and he's also shooting. So this is everything that Jason does in his melee combat. And that's one area that they actually seem to want to execute in the best possible way. It's something that is standard. It's something that's basic with him. He has all his takedowns, but then they go ahead and decide that they're going to add these mystic elements to him, which has been the source of a lot of conversation within the community. Now, how are these going to gel together in the sense of the mystic abilities? And that's the question that we as the gamers actually have to be asking right now, because these systems are already in place and there's almost no going back right now. So I want to say, for those who are comic book fans who say, I don't care if he has mystic powers in the comics, they shouldn't have added more mystic powers. I agree. Maybe that's a valid claim. And maybe for those of you who've said, I feel like they should have just pretty much, gone one direction or whatever it is, or I feel like this is nice and it's a good way to explore the character. I think that's also a good, valid, assessment of the character. But at the end of the day, these conversations also need to consider creative direction, creative freedom that's available for the developers to be able to write their story in a way that's not necessarily, limited to just Jason. I came back from entering the Lazarus pit and I'm going to fight in Gotham, and we're making an RPG game for 4 different characters. How are we going to make each of them very unique? I saw a comment from one of my audience members that said they could have done it in 4 or 5 different ways rather than the way they have it here in this character trailer. And I think that's valid, but they didn't hire you. They didn't hire me, because I could have probably done it differently as well. I have ideas for this character, don't get me wrong, and I've never shared them. But because the creative direction have already made their decisions, they're the ones that got hired. So this is the decision that we have, but it's not a decision that's outrageous, because if, say, you or me was in that position, people would judge you this same way. They would judge your work this same way, because comic book fans, that's exactly how we can be. So I'd say, unless this was, say, a disrespect to Jason, then I think, okay, everybody can say, oh, this is an outright, destruction or an outright, deterrent of how the character should have been depicted. But so far, so good. To me, this seems like a fair way to represent him. So they got to show us about 3 abilities. They showed us the AoE effect, basically where he shoots the ground and it explodes in front of everybody that's in front of him. He jumps back, and it's actually pretty cool. I like it. Shoots out these 2 bullets. For some reason, the moment they get impacted into the ground, everybody flies away, which is one of those AoEs that I said all the knights seem to have. He has this ability where he plants a little, I don't know if it's an explosive device on an enemy. He kicks the enemy into a crowd of other enemies, which is probably some way you can use it. Shoots it, it detonates. He seems to also have another ability where he can charge up maybe a boost to increase his damage or increase his speed. I don't know exactly what it is, but him standing behind this heavy talon probably depicts that, and I'm thinking that's exactly what it is. And this suit, somebody remind me what this suit is. I don't think we've ever seen this one so far. Maybe this might be the first time we're seeing it, but if it's something that's a suit that we saw in the 28 that they showed us, somebody please let me know, but I don't think we saw this. This looks different in a sense. And so I don't think that this character is bad. In fact, I'm quite excited to play this depiction of Jason, because honestly, we did not get to see Jason in action in the Arkham games in terms of exploring the entire open world. We got to see him in action in a, small DLC mission. We got to see him in the end game combat. But this particular Jason in a full-fledged video game where you can play this character for hours and hours, I think this way is going to allow for this character to be much more dynamic rather than monotonous, just running around, being a brute, shooting. But instead, adding this element to him seems to me that it's going to be sufficient for 30 to 40 hours of gameplay with him alone. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. I really appreciate you guys so much. Thank you very much for all of your input and for your participation so far. I really want to continue this conversation, but I don't want the video to run too long. So maybe we'll reach, some other conclusion some other day in a different episode. Thanks once again for watching the video. Peace out.